Welcome to the recorded lecture, Family Systems, Chapter 2 of the Solomon and O'Brien Pediatric Practice for Occupational Therapy Assistant Text. The resources for this lecture are your Solomon and O'Brien Chapter 2 text and the National OTA Certification Review and Exam Study Guide by Fleming Castaldi, pages 393 and 394. Hopefully, at the end of this lecture or reading this chapter or both, you'll be able to describe why it's important for occupational therapy practitioners to have knowledge and skills related to working with families. You should be able to describe the differences between a prescriptive and a consultative professional role. Understand a therapy program for a child affects the entire family unit. That's really key. Describe some key concepts of family systems and life cycle theories. Recognize and appreciate that all families have unique ways of adapting and coping with life events. And describe several communication strategies that you, as an occupational therapy practitioner, will be able to use to promote family partnerships. How do you define family? What characteristics or activities create an identity or culture in your family? Well, it's critical to our definition of family to understand that how we personally define what a family is must be broad enough to include non-traditional ideas of family beyond a mother, father, and their children. So, in its broadest definition, in many modern cultures, family may be defined as a family of origin, blended, foster, or non traditional groups of individuals who may or may not be related biologically and have an identity and provide members with a sense of belonging, unity, love, and well being. Family has its own identity, and that's based on their values and beliefs. It's influenced by internal and external factors and their lived experiences. So, when we work with families, we need to be able to have a flexible definition of who they are. And it's our responsibility as a practitioner to develop a collaborative relationship with a family. So, despite personal values and beliefs that may differ with the values and beliefs of the families we work with, our services are ultimately about the client and his or her family system. It's critical to those services to develop collaborative family relationships. Family occupations typically include routines, and these routines enable the family to function effectively and efficiently. And rituals and activities that have special meaning to the members of the family, and they provide a sense of satisfaction and togetherness. Typical family routines may include getting ready in the morning, going someplace in the car, coordinating after school activities, dinner, homework, putting away toys, finishing chores, and shopping. Family rituals may include symbolic activities that really convey the family's sense of identity and belonging and even continuity across generations. So, if we think of rituals, and I'm sure you can come up with some of your own family rituals, this could be holiday and birthday celebrations, a family night, um, sitting down to dinner and discussing the highs and lows of the days, dad making French toast on Sunday mornings, or even bedtime rituals such as reading and maybe followed by prayer. So it's important that we consider these family routines, rituals, and activities because they help define the family. Family occupations provide the emotional support, they socialize the members of the family, they promote health and independence, they support readiness for education, they develop potential productivity, and as we just talked about, they include routines, rituals, and activities. And family occupations provide a sense or satisfaction and togetherness. Now, I want to take you one step further that in a family, when there's a child with a special need, this can challenge the family's desired occupation, and in doing so, the family's identity. The child's special needs can dominate the family routines to the point that almost all the family routines center around that child. The family's valued rituals can be altered or become non existent because of the demands for caring for the child. An example that I experienced as a practitioner often is families with kids with autism could no longer enjoy extended family vacations or family vacations with extended family like cousins and or going to birthday parties or holiday gatherings because it was challenging for the child, and therefore it altered the way the family had participated in those things. But though these changes can appear or even feel negative, some families really embrace and view these changes as positive adaptations. Um, and as the fact that there's lifestyle changes is, yeah, it's ordinary. So when we're working with the family, we need to consider the importance of family occupations. So I'm going to tell you, families are important. And what are the reasons? Why are the reasons families are important? Well, guess who has a significant environmental influence on the child's life and development? The family. They're a unit. When we suggest, when we provide, when we say, hey, you should do this with the child, it's going to affect the entire family. Here's a simple example. Um, the young child needs to learn to tie their shoes. Well, we know that practice is going to make permanent. And so we say to the mom or the dad or the grandma or whoever is the main caregiver, um, every morning, this child needs to put their shoes on by themselves and tie their shoes. Don't do it for them. They've got to practice this. Well, now think of your own family and trying to get out the door in the morning and how long it might take that child to tie their shoes when, oh, yeah, you could do it in like 3 seconds and be done. Well, no, because we've made the suggestion that, oh, the child should practice this, then we might be making that family, the entire family, late for school, mom late for work, dad late for work, or missing appointments. So when we consider our interventions, we need to recognize that interventions with the children affect the family. And what I shared was just a really simple example. And we'll talk about more, but start to think about that. Who's constant in a child's life? Guess who? the family, regardless of the makeup of the family, that's the constant in the child's life. Family roles and routines support and facilitate occupational performance. They give the foundation. And laws and current service delivery models promote family-centered approach. We're going to talk about this in a couple of slides. And the AOTA has developed guidelines for working with families. By now, you might be saying, well, you just keep talking about families. Why is that? Well, it's because you need to consider that no child is an isolated client without a family unit, without parents, caregivers, siblings. They come as a package deal. Early caregiver child relationships are important for child development. Why? Think of what happens in those early relationships, attachments, learning how to build relationships and family structure. So, as practitioners, we must consider child's occupation within the family context, the family life, and the family occupations. So far, we've talked about the importance of recognizing the family and the child as part of the family. And what we need to understand as well is what is our role when we're working with the family? Well, we could have two types of roles. One could be a prescriptive role that we provide direct service with the child. We have our specialized knowledge and we have the skills to support the child. And in the prescriptive role, we kind of tell them, the family, this is what you need to do. This is, I know best. I went to school for this. This is what I practice. Or we could take the consultative role. And let me just back up one more minute. We would never be that bossy, but, um, well, there's the prescriptive role. The other role is the consultative role. And this is the most important role for us as practitioners when we work with the family because we're taking a collaborative approach. We're a dynamic therapeutic partner. And I love this word dynamic in these kind of phrases, like when we say we're in a dynamic profession or we're a dynamic therapeutic partner. Because the way I look at the word dynamic is that it's changing, it has energy, we can move, we're not set in this scripted approach, but we're going to develop collaboratively and grow intervention with the family. Consulting on desired goals for the child and for the family and strategies for achieving them builds collaboration and trust. So here I said we're collaborative. How do we do that? We consult. What is it you want for your child to be able to do? How does that fit in with the family? And then because they are invested in this, because those goals are meaningful and purposeful, guess what happens? They're invested. They work on them. The child makes progress. The family makes progress. These are the key ingredients to intervention success with families. And remember, interventions affect the life of the family. Think of, I used to have kids who came to outpatient services. So they had OT one day, they had speech another day, they had PT another day. And the appointment was 3:00 on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That meant that moms or dads or grandparents or whoever was taking the child would 3 days a week be sitting in, because this was a prescriptive approach. Well, and we consulted as well, but outpatient. They sat in an outpatient lobby while their child went in for one of those three services, OT, PT, or speech. Typically, they had siblings with them who were waiting for the child to finish their appointment. Think of how that impacts the family, that on those 3 days a week at 3 o'clock, nobody did anything but get that child to the therapy appointment. And then after the therapy appointment, of course, what are they going to work on at home, right? How is their carryover? So the family life was impacted by the time that it took to go to the intervention and whatever strategies and suggestions were sent home with them. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. This is a real thing. I just want you to be mindful that our interventions, our suggestions, our strategies affect the life of the family. Well, what does the practitioner bring to this therapeutic relationship? And I just scanned the screen really quickly and it doesn't say it here. I hope you bring empathy. I guess that would be under therapeutic use of self. That's one of the things I'm trying to instill so far in this presentation, that we're empathetic, that we understand, that we build a partnership with families. We have a dual role. One, we're experts. Yes, we know things that the family doesn't know. That's why they're coming to see us. That's why they're working with the therapy services. But we're also their partner for the family success, for achieving the successful outcomes and goals. We bring our therapeutic use of self. What does that involve? Active listening. We need to establish trust with the family. We're going to share resources and our knowledge. We're going to be skilled practitioners and share those skills. We might be teaching based on our skills and our experiences. We are going to share our professional experiences, our knowledge, and we must bring evidence based interventions. That means we need to spend time to identify interventions that we know will be successful. In any of our areas of practice, we are guided by legislation. And in pediatrics, this is a really big piece of legislation. It's Public Law 99 457, which is better known as IDEA. And it has been amended and refined over the course of time. And IDEA has Part B, which is related to school based services. I'm going to try and write that school. And Part C, oh, look at this. That's so you can write it too. Part C is related to the program for infants and toddlers with disability. And let me talk about this. This law ensures and mandates that families are co-leaders on a state level so that they're part of advisory boards and they make recommendations on the way service systems are delivered. In this law, it mandates that family concerns, resources, and priorities guide the development of individual intervention plans. In early intervention, it's called an IFSP. In education, it's an IEP. And families play an important role in the child's assessment and evaluations. And families also have certain rights to confidentiality, record keeping, notification, and other procedures. So this is the law. And this law um, also enforced that in early intervention services, we should promote interdisciplinary and interagency collaboration. That means we should take a team approach. And in this team, the family is part of the team. So in early intervention services, it's a very team based approach, it's collaborative. The family is very crucial to it. And yeah, that's early intervention. As you know, AOTA provides guidelines for curriculum development. It's actually through ACOTE. And what is recommended is that educational programs include and teach family systems theory, family life cycle, family ecology, help students recognize the effect of disabilities on families, the effect of families and environment on the children with disabilities. So this is reciprocal. What our role is of as practitioners is that we ensure that we develop a rapport with families and that we collaborate with families. I could speak for a long time on this slide, but I'm going to try and stick with what's on the slide here. Policy. So public laws and legislation define our approach, our methods for service delivery, and in children and youth, interdisciplinary and family centered approaches are used when planning and implementing interventions. That in regular education settings, children with disabilities are included. This could include preschools and elementary schools and high schools, and that the therapist act as a consultant. And this consultant provides intervention that is integrated into the children's regular routines and natural environments instead of using pullout. And when we talk about the IEP and when we talk about educational settings, we'll talk about the difference between pullout and working in the setting. But it's important that as much as we can, we integrate our interventions into the regular routines. Recent changes in service delivery and implementation resulted in the expansion of the role for OT practitioners. Their duties now include assessing family interests, priorities, and concerns, observing and gathering information about the daily routines of the children and families in their homes and in the classrooms, gathering and sharing information with families about the development of intervention strategies, as well as implementing therapy in collaboration with parents, caregivers, and general educators. Per the text, in 2020, less than half the children in the U.S. are projected to be white, non Hispanic. And in contrast, although the U.S. population is becoming more diverse, the healthcare practitioners are predominantly white. So, what does it mean for practice? Well, we need to practice cultural humility. We need to understand cultural backgrounds. We may be working with interpreters. We should have the ability to appreciate and respect cultural differences. recognize that children with disabilities will be in early childhood and educational programs. And I put these boxes here because this, I think you should check off that you want to embed therapy into daily routines across the settings, that as a practitioner, you should have expertise in consulting and working on interdisciplinary teams, and you should be informed on community based programs and services so you can share that information with the family. So maybe rather than putting them on a home exercise program, the family has a membership at a YMCA, and they can enjoy the entire family could enjoy um, programs and exercises there. So we're going to start to understand family practices right now. And family practices refer to ongoing activities that promote the active participation of families in decision making related to their child. So, when would they make these decisions? Well, during the assessment process, the planning process, and the intervention process. Remember, we collaborate, we work in partnership with families. In family practices, um, we lead the development of a service plan. So, what is the service plan? A set of goals for the family and the child, and the services and supports to achieve those goals. And in family practice, it supports families in achieving the goals they hold for their child and other family members. So, do you see how the goals are very family directed? Just so you know, the information that I am referring to is from your textbook, box 2.2, Family Practices, Division for Early Childhood Recommended Practices in Early Intervention, Early Childhood Special Education. It's on page 14 of the fifth edition of the Solomon and O'Brien text. So the text helps us understand that family practices are divided into three themes, and they're family centered practice, family capacity building practices, and family and professional collaboration. So on this slide, when we think of family centered practices, these are practices that treat the family with dignity and respect. The intervention is individualized, flexible, and responsive to each family's circumstance. That means we're client centered and the client is the family. In a family centered practice, the family members receive complete and unbiased information to make informed decisions. And the family members are involved in acting on the choices to strengthen the child, the family, and the parent. So that means education is provided and support. The second theme of family practices is family capacity building practices. And these are practices that include the participatory um, opportunities and experiences afforded to families to strengthen existing parenting knowledge and skills. And it's to promote the development of new parenting abilities so that they um, experience self efficacy, that they understand the purpose, and they believe in the intervention and practice ideas. The third theme in family practices is family and professional collaboration. And you have heard me speak about this throughout this presentation. And these are practices that build relationships between families and professionals who work together to achieve mutually decided outcomes and goals that promote family competencies and support the development of the child. So I hope by now your understanding when we're talking about families is that it's a collaboration, and the yes, we bring the expertise and the understanding to what the goals should be, what the families might need, but it's discussed and determined among the team, the family, the practitioners, to agree upon what they would like to develop. On the next slide, I actually have a cut and paste of box 2.2, so you can see the rest of the information there. If you want to see it large size, it's on page 14. I'm not going to read all the information on the slide, but I am going to abbreviate the information. You can read it as well as I can. If you would like to see more information about this, you can visit the Division for Early Childhood, but these are their recommendations that practitioners build a trusting and respectful partnership, that they provide the family with up-to-date and comprehensive unbiased information so that the family can make those decisions and choices, that as practitioners we're responsible to the family's concerns and recognize changing life circumstances, that practitioners and families work together, that practitioners support family functioning, they promote family confidence and competence, that as practitioners we engage the family in opportunities that support and strengthen their parenting knowledge, that we work with the family to identify, access, and use formal and informal resources, that we provide the family with learning opportunities. So, if the child's at risk for developmental delay or disability and they're a dual language family, then we need to use multiple languages to support the child's growth and development. And when I say multiple, relevant to the family. That practitioners help families know and understand their rights, that we teach them how to advocate for themselves and how to be a leader. One of the things when we work with families, we want to promote them to be independent so that when we are no longer in the picture, they know how to navigate, they know how to advocate. So, family systems theory. We learn lots of different theories. We learn motor learning theories and sensory processing theories. Well, this is a family systems theory. And why are we learning this? Because it's mandated by law that we understand families, and our accrediting body, ACODE, um, states that we need to understand family systems theory. So, family systems theory provides us a framework for guiding interactions with families. It helps us describe how families are connected across time and space. That means that they're dynamic, that this framework will help us understand how the family is as a system. So, how they interact, how they change. And each family has some semblance of order, some system. So, this framework um, helps us as practitioners understand how we work with families and what our role is, and understand that families change, that life happens and family changes. So, the key concepts of this theory are the morphostatic principle, the morphogenic principle, and equifinality. So, I'm going to try to do my best to explain these a little bit. And the morphostatic principle is kind of like the unwritten rule, or sometimes even the spoken rule. It's what helps us maintain the order. It's the flow of the family. The textbook gives examples of the family rhythms like meals and bedtimes and expectations for bathing and greeting and departures and just pet names. Think of your own family. And in this, uh, these rules and principles help us understand if we're moving in the right direction. They give us guidance, is what I want to say. As a member of this unit, they help give us guidance. So an example, the text mentions that families might always check in with the child. How was your day? How did things go? And when that doesn't happen, then there's a sense of disorder. Remember, families have a capacity for change, and change is inevitable. And we all know change is not always easy for everyone. And with the morphogenic principle, um, it's form evolving. That means families can gain or lose family members through marriage, divorce, birth, and death, and shifting roles. And change is possible only through the introduction and assimilation of new information into the family, such as gaining or losing members. And the text makes a connection back to the fact that in the morphostatic, a parent would check in, how's your day going? And if that doesn't happen, then an individual of the group might sense, oh, there's a problem. And maybe there is a problem. Maybe the parent doesn't have time, or they have a new job, or uh, roles are changing. And this is then likely to lead to a change, which would be considered family evolution or form evolving. So there's going to be a change um, because of life circumstances. Equifinality, I'm going to stick with the text so I don't mess this up. Um, this concept is a subset of the morphogenic principle, and it says that any system can change in an infinite number of ways. So, evaluating, diagnosing, and defining events based on a pattern in the moment put a linear, artificial punctuation on a process. But if we think that family members evolve along different paths, but they can arrive at a similar end state, that families can change in an infinite number of ways to meet their goal, that there's got to be some flexibility in our understanding, and that where does each family member want things to go from here is dependent on their beliefs and values, how things have changed, and what their goal is. So, what does this mean for our practice using family systems theories? Well, that we as practitioners bring core knowledge, and that the practitioner helps develop communication skills to help the family, that the practitioner is going to acknowledge and accept the current family system, that they're going to know that the family is capable of change and facilitate that change, They're also going to be accepting of that change. And these ideas form the basis for a consultative role. And remember, this is important in family practice. Why? Because we really want to empower the families to become advocates, to understand their family, to know where their resources are. Because unlike the members of the family, they're going to be together for a long time, but we are not going to always be part of that family. So if we can support them without them becoming dependent on us is a great thing. So we know as the practitioner, we want to enter the collaborative role, the consultative role in OT. We don't want to be so prescriptive, but we also need to establish a trusting relationship. And that the first step to do that is to identify what the family outcomes are. What does the family want to achieve? Where do they want to go? Essentially, what are their hopes and dreams? What do they see with you in the picture? How can you support them? And we have to recognize that every family is different and every member of the family might see things differently. So, getting everyone on the same page is important. So, it's a good team approach. Um, we also have to help. So, once we know what they want to work on, we have to help the family develop strategies to accomplish their goals. So, what steps, what environment, how long can they work on this? Are they going to use uh, backward and forward chaining? Are they going to um, use a specific method? Maybe they're going to use some adaptive techniques, but we have to help the family develop what strategies. We're not just going to say, hey, it's great. You're going to work on toileting. Good luck. Have fun. No, we're going to break it down. We're going to make sure that the potty chair or the toilet is the correct height for the child. We're going to look at the environment. We're going to look at the family schedule. All those things need to be taken into consideration. We always, always, always include the family in this process. We also want to consider the family roles and their timeline. So, how much time do they have to dedicate to a particular goal? What is their expectation? Um, I had a family who was preparing to travel to Disney, and they let me know like 6 months in advance so that we could help the child get used to eating in different places and going to the bathroom in different places and preparing for a busy schedule out of their routine. They had a timeline. They were invested in breaking this down into small steps. Um, it's important when we're working with the family that they're part of the planning, because then they're going to be able to implement the plan. They're going to be on board with it. They know what the timing is. And they are also going to be seeing the results. And sometimes the results are not always, outcomes are not happening as quickly as we'd like. Um, and then we need to sit back and plan and say, okay, how can we make an adjustment here? Or maybe they did a great job and wow, this is all set. We need to empower them and congratulate them and say, awesome, awesome, awesome. So we want to integrate these interventions into daily routines and patterns because we all know it's so much easier. Some people who don't like to walk but need to exercise put their shoes by the door, so their sneakers by the door, so when they walk in or out, the shoes are right there as a reminder, and it's just another step to help get closer to establish this routine and pattern. As practitioners, it's key to stay for intervention to stay in that consultative role, um, because we are empowering the family. We also want to be very mindful that the family is an evolving process and that it's essential to reassess goals and intervention strategies on a regular basis. Ask them how it's working. How are they able to follow the plan? Oh, is it too often? Can we cut it back? Where else can we fit it in? Um, Asking those kind of questions. And be mindful that developing a trusting relationship really does take time. And the text has some clinical pearls that I'm just going to read because they truly are clinical pearls. It says the first step in successful intervention is identifying what the family hopes to accomplish. We covered that. Intervention efforts should begin with a clarification and acknowledgement of the way in which family members perceive their situation, define their priorities, however unfocused their goals may seem. So that's getting everyone on the same page and understanding. Another clinical pearl is the likelihood of families following through with the intervention plan depends on the extent to which those plans are constructed to fit with the family's existing routines, beliefs, patterns, and family life. That's so very true. And finally, curiosity and genuine interest are more useful and powerful in establishing family partnerships than assessing, than evaluating, or diagnosing, which is really true. Get to know the family. The family knows their child best. The family knows where they want to go, and we have the skills to help them. While we are talking about families, we're going to talk about the family life cycle. And the text points out that, like individuals, families also go through normal or typical developmental phases. And this is a process that the family moves through. And you and I know that when there's change, when we're moving between phases, that equals stress. So, moving from one stage to another causes significant stress. And what can be some of these stages? Well, birth, marriage, leaving home, death. And these are normative or usual expected life cycle events. So just think about it when you went back to school, how that changed the dynamics and added stress in your family. Or if you've brought in a new partner, or you've experienced a death of a loved one in the family. All these things impact the family and they cause stress. Now, kids with disabilities bring in a different set of events, and they're considered non normative life cycle events. And what does that mean? Well, they're not the typical events, they're not the typical milestones that families experience. And what can they be? Well, hospitalizations, multiple doctor's visits and appointments, uh, being part of special education programs. Think of a kid in EI and all the different well, they're starting to reduce this in EI because of this, but all the different relationships that need to be formed. There's an OT, there's a PT, there's a speech pathologist, there's a case manager. Even if kids aren't in EI, all the professionals that the child has to interact with, as well as the family. And when kids miss typical milestones, it impacts how a family member can feel, how a parent might feel, how a caregiver might feel. And It's a tricky realization. So, this also causes stress, dependency on practitioners or on others when individuals are experiencing the non normative life cycles. Because let's think this through. Okay, you're a family of five, one of the family members is experiencing frequent hospitalizations. Oh, now that changes the family routine. Who's going to bring the kids to school? Who's going to get meet them off the bus? Who's going to make the dinners and go for groceries? And it just adds up. And so that is when we rely on many other people, right? It takes a village. When we think about these stressors, the normative type stresses, we can share that with a lot of different individuals. We have people who have all experienced these life stressors. But the families who are experiencing those non normative life cycle events have fewer people to share their experiences with. And research shows us that um, sharing experiences and getting support from families, friends, and neighbors are effective strategies to deal with stress. So think about if you are in the consultative role of an occupational therapy practitioner, maybe you're identifying resources for these families to have time to share with other individuals who actually understand and can, for lack of a better word right now, commiserate, who can talk about these experiences with them. When a child comes into a family with varying abilities, it does challenge the routine. But before I talk about that, let me also share this family, the families, discover a, a love that they cannot comprehend sometimes, a deepness in their nurturing and caring, and um, a sense of cohesiveness that comes about the family, celebrating joy. These are all part of what um, happens in a family. Conversely, their values can be challenged. And does that make sense to you? Well, it should. We talked about how family occupations and routines can help provide the family the identity. Well, when we have a child with differing abilities and has a medication schedule or a feeding schedule or um, has to follow a set routine, it's going to cause the family's routines to center around the child. And I want you to be mindful that this can also impact other siblings. Sometimes family values um, are challenged because the rituals, so attending those parties that we talked about or holidays, can become altered or non existent. But guess what? They also develop new routines. They develop new ways to celebrate the holidays. They have their new rituals, habits, and routines. And many families view these changes as positive adaptations. And I have a friend whose son is on the autism spectrum, and he would not let them take down the Christmas tree. Now, this child is 16 years old and he can part with the Christmas tree. But what the family did is they just put different ornaments on it for different seasons. And now it's become a ritual that in the fall they put pumpkins and fall decorations. In the spring, they bring in uh, flowers from outdoors or put on bulbs. And they have all these different things, but it's really become part of the family. So something that started as a challenge became something that's integrated into their family and helps support their identity. As a matter of fact, the person on Facebook puts their tree up every time they change it. So this has been going on for almost 2 decades now. Pretty cool. I'm also realizing that this is a little bit of a lengthy presentation, and I'm going to start sharing so many stories and stick with the facts. So we just talked about the life cycle and how the cycle of the family can be challenged and there are stressors. So what do we do? What's the implication for practice when we start to think about the family life cycle? Well, we need to recognize life events, changes, and are inadequate representations for the range of the family experiences that exist. So in the moment, we can't judge the family on what is happening. As practitioners, we need to consider the cultural factors. We need to be mindful of the values and beliefs of our own that may differ from the family, and we have to refrain from judgment. We should be sensitive to those transitional events that we know are stressful. They're stressful in our own lives, and they can be normative and non normative. And sometimes just listening can be a huge support. We want to consider the big picture for the family, what's happening, how many changes have they gone through. We're going to think family consultation is preferred at these stressful times. Do you need another body in your house? Do you need another appointment to go to when you're dealing with these stressors? And finally, that non normative events, consider parent to parent support and methods for sharing and coping. So, how can we help these families who don't always have the people that they need to just share how they feel? Well, we need to find those resources. We can educate in coping strategies and be there for the family. Life cycle, family life cycle, stressors. On this slide, we're going to talk about family adaptation. And families are dynamic, they're living systems that evolve or change in response to both internal events like illness, birth, and death. We're thinking the life cycle of the family, and in response to external events, the loss of a job, moving, a new practitioner coming in to work with the child. These are external. So, like all living things, families are adaptive. And this is, remember, we talked about the morphogenic principle. This is an example of the morphogenic principle. And in recent years, research has revealed that families have been saying for a long time, but has not always been the focus of intervention, that despite the stresses, despite the differing abilities, the family is strengthened or changed in positive ways. So we need to take that and remember that. We also know that family social support is huge. When families recognize their resources, they could be time, they could be money, but they could also use some different coping strategies to help them get through these stressful, changing times. And box 2.4 in your text on page 19 has an outline of these. And one of the perceptual coping strategies is passive appraisal, where ignoring a problem and hoping it will go away is used. That's that's not always a great strategy, but it's a strategy we might recognize in a family. There's reframing, which is redefining a situation in ways that make it more manageable. And sometimes we hear, um, well, it's great because now I'm going to do this instead. So they're reframing. There's also downward comparison, and that's identifying a situation that is worse than your own. Well, yeah, this was tough on us, but it's not like so and so's family. And also the use of spiritual beliefs as a coping strategy, and that's using your spiritual beliefs to make sense of or find meaning in a situation. So the bottom line here, and I'm actually going to draw the bottom line here, families have adaptive potential, and we as practitioners support that. Now we know that families have an adaptive potential, and it's unlimited. And remembering this can help families as well as practitioners achieve outcomes. So, what are the implications for practice? Well, we need to consider using or supporting existing resources. Sometimes we come in with great ideas and, oh, they could go to OTA Watertown and they could do this and they could do that. But let's start with the basics. Let's start with what's local, what resources do they have available to them. And we can't forget that it could be in their neighborhood, churches, neighborhoods, playgrounds, community recreation centers. Why? Because it's important to keep them, help families be part of their neighborhood, to feel part of where they live. And it's important that to remember that the family has various functions that they need to carry out. And if we develop these really extensive intervention plans and make lots of appointments for the child, well, we are interfering with that. So family routines must be considered when home programs are developed. Otherwise, these time consuming programs cannot be done within the parameters of everything else the family has to do. What does the family have to do? Wow, lots. And if you're a mom, dad, caregiver, aunt, uncle who are looking at families, well, you know that there's activities related to education, leisure and play, daily care, affection, economics, social identity, and this is just a very small list. Families have lots of um, expectations to achieve, and family routines are important. As we've moved through this PowerPoint, there's been slides that say implications for practice, and I hope those are takeaway moments for you for things that you are making the connection to that you need to be mindful of that you can integrate. And the text points out these essential skills for successful intervention with families. Well, the first is solution focused curiosity and interest. We really need to focus on the strengths and achievements and um, identify what the family wants to do. We should build on the strengths. We should support the adaptive potential, the morphogenic potential that families have. And we must have the ability to withhold our judgment. So, oh, if they would have only started earlier. Oh, if they would have. We don't know the would haves. Be in the here and now with this family. We should collaboratively set the goals. So we know why. I've talked about it on many other slides, but as a practitioner, you're going to need to listen, support, and develop those common goals within the means of the family, within and when I say means, their abilities, their time, their interests. We also need to acknowledge what the family is saying and experiencing. So maybe this is just too hard, or maybe this is just too easy. What is their feedback? And another huge piece of this is continuity. So focusing on the future. Where am I going to be as a practitioner with them? Am I going to be with them in 10 years? Probably not. So we need to maintain a rapport. We want to problem solve. We want to be consistent with our sessions and the progress. We want to do what we say we're going to do. We want to provide the consultation and strategies for support to help them move forward, to focus on their future. And I'm going to add here that we empower. And I don't know if I can write and talk at the same time, but it's really important to teach these families how to advocate for their needs and then empower them for their successes. Let them know, oh, the E already disappeared. Uh-oh. Let them know how great they are. Don't let that empowerment disappear. You want to empower them. Help them recognize how great they are, how far they've come, and what they have done. The information I'm going to share on the following slides are from the NBCOT Therapy Ed Study Guide. And it actually takes us through looking at family participation through the OT process. So there are no specific evaluations created right now to evaluate family participation, or at least none that I know of either right now. However, in the evaluation process, we know that the OT can contribute to the assessment with service competent. The OT and the OTA can assess occupational performance during screening and interviews. And when I say this, the OTA is not going to interpret, but they can share. They can take this information and share it with the OT. In the evaluation process, we determined roles, responsibilities, and expectations, and the identifying obstacles and barriers to the family performance would be part of the evaluation process. It's great that these slides are reiterating everything that we had said from the beginning, that in intervention, it's going to be collaboration on the goals. Intervention might include modifications and accommodations. We will consider meaningful activities. We're going to suggest appropriate supports. We always meet the just right challenge for who? For the family and the child. Safety is a huge consideration. And how might my intervention be played out? Well, it might be prescriptive, it might be one to one, so directive, it could be counseling, it could be groups, and it could be printed materials. And education, right? So sometimes it might involve role playing, practicing communication, us teaching, and skill development. The Therapy Ed Study Guide also had a section on intervention for parenting activities. That's great because what are we acting as? Sometimes we're in the consulting role, right? And then we need to provide activities for parents. We might teach them to care for the child's physical needs, how to use specific equipment. We might talk about typical developmental milestones, and how to progress the child through their developmental milestones. We are going to consider the equipment. Can we help adapt equipment, items that are already in their home? One mom I know wanted a ball pit for a child, and they couldn't afford like a regulation ball pit. I happened to have a bunch of those ball pit balls, so I gave them to her, and she put them in her tub. And so they made a ball pit in the tub, and they put a towel around where the faucet came out so the child wouldn't get hurt. But they were creative, so adapting equipment. We want to be respectful always of the cultural, socioeconomic, and personal differences within families. We're no judgment. We want to teach self reliance because we're not always going to be there, and we don't want them to become dependent upon us. We can and will refer them to support groups, and we always we're mandated reporters, and we want to be mindful of signs of neglect or abuse. As practitioners, we make lots of recommendations. Well, when we make the recommendations, please consider the consequences, how much time it's going to impact the family, how it fits into their lifestyle, the primary role of parenting the child and other family members. We want to take the collaborative approach. We want to be a provider. We want to be non intrusive. We want to support. We want to empower the child to participate. We want to empower the family to recognize their strengths. And we want to really strengthen this child parent bond. And now for the penultimate slide. What did you learn? Well, I'm going to be quiet here. This is your time for reflection. I hope what you recognize that you learned is that in pediatrics, the families involved, that early child caregiver relationships are foundational for development, that OT practitioners understand development and can support families, that therapeutic relationships develop and support intervention, that relationship building requires understanding, empathy, therapeutic use of self, that families of children with special needs experience compromised routines and rituals, and they may experience setback and grief. And I'm going to add to this, but they are adaptable, that they're resilient, that they're strong, that they enjoy with their families, and that OT practitioners build relationships, provide guidance, and support and empower family members because the family is going to move on without us. Thanks for listening. I hope you learned a lot and have a great whatever time of day it is for you.